Unit 5, Notes 5 on World War II. This is Part 2. We had talked about how France and Britain had tried appeasement when it came to dealing with Germany after each time that it had broken the Treaty of Versailles. We talked about the rise of dictators in multiple countries, mainly in Europe, but also in Japan. So we're going to basically talk about the war itself and how it began, minus the United States, because the United States didn't get involved right away. All right, in 1939, Europe found itself once again arming for war. Two sides had formed, the Allied powers and the Axis powers. Some nations, like the United States, try to remain neutral. In your notes packet, you've got this map. I would like for you to basically color it in. You need 3 colors. You need one for the Allied powers, one for Axis powers, and one for the countries that try to remain neutral. Okay. There's going to be some arrows, Germany invading, Austria and Czechoslovakia and Poland. USSR, you can see, is going to push east or westward into what we call Eastern Europe. Okay. Germany is going to invade into France through the Netherlands and Belgium. Okay, and then they're ultimately going to take Paris. Excuse me. Germany is also going to invade Sweden. Italy is going to invade into northern Africa. The Axis powers is also going to include Japan, which is not on this map. So many nations still had allies and colonies around the world, making this once again another world war. For example, Great Britain still has control over Australia and Canada. So while each of those countries elects its own prime minister, when Great Britain goes to war, they go with Great Britain. So the United States wanted to remain neutral, and so did so till 1941, when we know that Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, and that brings us into the war. So on the map, make sure that you also note that in 1941, the United States joins the Allied powers. Okay? So we have the Soviet Union, the United States, United Kingdom, and France all on the Allied side. Now you might want to ask, why the Soviet Union? Because they were against Germany. They really didn't want Germany invading over into this region. And in that situation, even though Joseph Stalin was a pretty terrible guy, just as bad if not worse than Adolf Hitler, the goal was to stop Hitler because he was the one that was the biggest threat invading this region. That's going to come back to haunt us and bite us after the war is over. Because we're going to have to decide how to deal with a lot of these lands, because the USSR or the Soviet Union is going to want to take them. Okay? And then, of course, on the other side, okay, the Axis powers, we have the Third Reich or Germany, Italy, and the Japanese Empire. So if you watch the video here, you'll see over time it tells you the date up in the corner and how Germany starts spreading further and further. Okay, that's once they invade Poland, then war breaks out.
To withdraw their troops from Poland, the state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
Okay, 1940.
We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be.
Let's see, Northern Africa is down here.
Fight on the landing ground. We shall fight in the streets and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
at this point, the United States is involved.
Suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces.
You can see how much of Europe Germany ended up controlling during parts of the war. The United States focuses first on dealing with North Africa, so then we can come up this way. Here comes the United States. We start mainly, you can see what Russia's doing over here. Once the United States gains all of North Africa, you'll see them start to come up this direction. You can see little tiny Switzerland is neutral, so it's left alone up there in the mountains. Oh, there you see the United States is helping, starting with the boot of Italy. You'll see the blue start to creep up. There it is. They'll defeat Mussolini. You see that Russia's making some progress out in Eastern Europe. The United States is making more progress in Italy. You can see some British, this is 1944. And we liberate France. You can see Germany is quickly losing its stronghold in 1945. You've got the Russians coming from the east, and you've got the Allies coming from the west. And we're liberating all of those regions, and the war ends in 1945 in April. Well, in April for Europe. So let's talk about these. Though the United States was officially neutral at the start of World War II, President Roosevelt had convinced Congress to support legislation that sent $50 billion in war supplies and more than to more than 40 allied countries. This is called the Lend-Lease Act. We had tried to pretend we were neutral, all while kind of secretly funneling money and supplies during World War I to the Allies. Germany was on to us, and that's one of the reasons why they kept attacking our ships. So instead of trying to pretend that we were neutral, we said that we are not going to get involved in the war with troops, but we would send money and supplies. We were just upfront about it, that there are certain countries that we didn't agree with, and we weren't going to trade with them. This is called the Lend-Lease Act. The United States also voiced opposition to Japanese occupation of Indochina, which was in Vietnam and Cambodia. We refused to trade with Japan because we didn't agree with their hostility and their use of force in their region. Okay, because of that, early Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The U.S. declared war on Japan. So you're going to write down Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The U.S. tried to remain neutral until Japan attacked the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, December 7th, 1941.
Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
All right. When the United States entered the war, the Allies were not prepared to attack Germany directly. Instead, they focused on North Africa, where German and Italian Axis forces had advanced. The goal is to push the Axis powers out of North Africa and then U.S. troops sending them north through Italy. which is what you saw in that little animated map video. This November of 1942, 100,000 Allied troops, including Americans, commanded by General George Patton, arrived in North Africa. After months of fierce fighting, the Axis troops in North Africa surrendered to the Allied troops. So you're going to write down that the U.S. began the campaign in Europe by pushing Axis powers out of North Africa and then north through Italy. Okay. Germany had used the same military plans to expand into Western European nations as they had used during World War I. Troops marched through Belgium and into northern France and all the way to Paris. They called it the Schlieffen Plan, and it almost worked completely in World War I. And you'd think that France and Belgium and Netherlands and Britain and everybody would have figured out that they might plan that route again, but they assumed that they wouldn't take the same route, and yet they did. So once the Axis powers were removed from northern Africa, Allied troops were successful in liberating Italy from Mussolini's power. It was time to focus on liberating France. On June 6, 1944, the United States, Britain, and Canada launched the largest combined land, sea, air operation in history. Allied forces crossed the English Channel to Normandy, France. The Allied goal was to push the Germans back to Germany. This massive invasion is called D-Day. Okay, this is what the movie Saving Private Ryan starts out with. It's also, if you've seen the miniseries Band of Brothers, the gentlemen, they are dropped behind enemy lines from parachutes, and so that they can help the D-Day guys coming in from sea. So the Allies organized a massive land, sea, air invasion that began June 6, 1944 to push the Axis powers out of France. The United States sent our troops to both Omaha and Utah Beach on the coast of France, which this northern part of France is Normandy. Okay, so 1944. Here's D-Day. Would you put a star on your map to show where that took place? This 1944 is the D-Day invasion of France. After helping to liberate France, U.S. forces led by Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of U.S. forces in Europe, pushed the Nazis back out of Belgium, continued the fight into Germany. The winter of 1944 was long and difficult. They called it the Battle of the Bulge. By April of 1945, Allied troops were closing in on Berlin, Germany. Soviet troops were closing in the east. The United States and British forces from the west. Italians had captured and executed Mussolini. Hitler was surrounded. To avoid being captured, Hitler committed suicide, and Germany officially surrendered in early May. On May 8, 1945, the Allies celebrated VE Day, which is victory in Europe. However, there was still work to do in the Pacific. During the 1930s, Hitler's Nazi government had passed a series of laws targeting Jewish people in Germany. Anti-Semitism, or racism against Jewish people, is not a new idea, but Hitler intensified these feelings by giving German citizens a group of people to blame for their economic hardships. The Nuremberg laws were passed in Germany in 1935. These anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish laws revoked rights of citizenship for Jewish citizens. Jews could not marry non-Jews. Jews under the Nazis were forced to wear yellow stars to identify them as Jewish in public. The Nazis used propaganda to spread anti-Semitism and their views, and they encouraged vandalism of synagogues and Jewish businesses. So please write down the Holocaust is discrimination and persecution of Jewish people based on their ethnic and religious differences. And the Holocaust is the systematic murder of over 6 million Jews and 5 million other minorities by the Nazis. Okay, Hitler and the Nazis took their anti-Semitism much further. They established a system of genocide to eliminate all Jews from German-occupied regions of Europe. Okay, they were not a part of the Aryan racial purity.